Welcome to True Crime and Wine Time. I'm Terry.
And I'm Llama.
Tonight, we are uncorking the truth behind one of the darkest crimes and breaking it down together with you.
One case, one conversation, and one or maybe two glasses of wine to take the edge off. It's time to get comfortable and double check those locks before we get started.
So let's take a sip and dive in. Hello, beautiful people. How are you guys? I guess I can't say hello to Llama because she's not here, but I see she's in the chat. Llama is not with us tonight. It'll be just me. She can't be here, but she is in the chat. I just have one request, Llama. Do not get us kicked off the internet by ranting in the chat, because I know I have a tendency to go even worse when I'm just texting or using my fingers. You know, those keyboard warrior moments get bad. So I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And before we get started, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss when we go live or when we drop an episode. Because sometimes, like I think it was today or maybe it was yesterday, I just popped on into the live last minute while I was getting dressed and ranted about the post office. So that must have been today. Now, if you're listening to this over on the pods, please download and leave a rating and a review, as it helps us get our podcast noticed. And also, guys, you can become a member of our YouTube channel, which comes with all sorts of exclusive perks. I mean, there are perks on tops of perks. I mean, they are the perkiest perks, okay? So just click that join button and pick a tier which works best for you. Our lowest one starts at 99 cents, and it really means a lot to us to have you support our show. And if you can't, that's okay. Just hang out with us and support us that way. Now, tonight, guys, we are going to be doing part 8. Yes, this was originally a 3-part episode. I think maybe 2. And then Llama got a hold of it, and I am so glad she did, but she's rubbing off on me. I'm saying that now, and it's okay. But we are on part 8 of the Butcher Baker of Alaska series, where we are diving deep into infamous serial killer Robert Hansen, his endless number of victims who we refuse to be forgotten, and how all of it could have been stopped numerous times. Numerous. They would have just listened to the women. Okay. The state of Alaska has a lot of blood on their hands, and we're here to shine a light on all of it. Warning, there will be lots of rants and cursey words. I can say there's also going to be a lot in the chat because that's where Llama is. So she's going to be over there giving us her rant. Now, tonight, I am having, it's a watermelon Jolly Rancher mix with sparkling water and Tito's. And guys, I will tell you, this drink is deadly. A lot of times I will drink it just the sparkling water with the watermelon Jolly Rancher. But I remembered that I needed vodka because we're in Alaska again. Okay, we're still in Alaska. So, everybody, grab whatever you're drinking, grab a cozy blanket. I've got mine right here. And let's get into tonight's case because, guys, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that it's gotten any better. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that because, guys, it hasn't. It hasn't. And look, Sick Llama makes no promises. Uh-oh. Okay, guys, I've put y'all on notice, and she's under her mod account, so we can't even kick her out. Oh, Lord. How did we let that happen? Okay. We have spent the last 7 parts Peeling back the veneer of the meek baker, we traced Robert Hansen's evolution from a roadside scavenger who prowled the Anchorage Strip in a metallic green Pontiac and a red Volvo and a truck with a camper in the back, to now an aviator who would go on to use the vast, unmonitored Alaskan bush as his personal disposal site. God, I hate this man. We saw the tragedy of his early victims not getting an inkling of justice that they rightly deserved. You know what, guys? I just remembered I'm supposed to be doing these videos, okay? Don't remember which one I'm supposed to be on. Okay, I'm good, guys. How about that? I'm a little bit behind, but I'm good. Now, the unsolved murder of, why is it not working? Okay, guys, it's not working. Hold on, guys. I'm trying to click. There we go. My mouse was doing this mouse thing where it didn't want to work. But the unsolved murders of Beth Van Zanten, Shirley Jonas, and ZZ Mason, and the disappearance of Megan Emmerich and Mary Thill. Okay, my mouse does not like me tonight. All who have families that still have no answers over 50 years later. So we saw that the Jane Doe dancer was silenced. Okay, sorry, by her own trauma and bias of society and the infuriating near miss escape of Christy Hayes. Sorry, guys, I'm just rearranging my screen here a little bit since my mouse is being funky, okay? Now, little did Anchorage know that the meek baker was gone, and in his place is a man with wings, a man with a map, and a man who, thanks to the last 10 years of systematic failures by the state of Alaska, believes he is untouchable. And guys, he's not wrong to some degree, okay? Alaska, they did that to him. For the next few years, the silence of the Alaskan wilderness will be punctuated by the roar of a Piper Super Cup engine. Guys, that just freaks me out, okay? Robert Hansen has moved from being a scavenger of the streets to an architect of disappearances. He's no longer looking for dates. He's looking for cargo. Before we get into the stories of these women, I reserved several episodes. I should say, we reserved several episodes to be able to tell their individual stories and showcase who they were as people. And they were more than just dancers or sex workers or victims of Robert Hansen, because they were and they are. Uh-oh. Savage is in the chat. Yes, I am flying solo and I am unsupervised. And Double H isn't home, so you should be especially scared, okay? Now, Llama didn't think it was going to be hard and difficult to find information about 17 plus victims of an infamous serial killer from 45 years ago. And she said she doesn't know if it was because of the time period or it was because many of them had numerous aliases or that simply nobody cared. Llama, I'm here to tell you, I agree with you. It's a combination of things, and it just breaks my heart for them. Society didn't see them as people while they were alive. Robert Hansen didn't know how much, didn't about any of them, not even their names. Even after many were identified and found, the only evidence they ever walked this earth was merely a sentence or two. That's horrific. So while we may not have much information to share about some individuals, that doesn't mean that we've forgotten them. Okay. They say you live as long as the last person who remembers you. So please, I'm begging you, keep their names alive both in your mind and on your tongue, because they deserve that. Okay? They deserve that. And Llama, yes, this case has been heartbreaking, and you have done an amazing job with it. And I'm so happy that you forced me to do so many episodes. So there's a video, no sound. Okay, I have never done a video before, guys. So we're going to see how Terry does. So this could go off the rails, but let's see how this goes. My mouse is being a little witch tonight. Okay, I did it. Okay. The year 1980 began under a dark, literal cloud. On May 18th, Mount St. Helens erupted in Washington, sending a plume of ash into the atmosphere that blanketed the Pacific Northwest. It was a day the world changed, a day of sudden cataclysmic shifts. I can't say that word. But guys, for the people of Alaska, the news of the eruption dominated the airways, the newspapers, and the conversation in every coffee shop. But in the quiet port town of Seward, okay, guys, my mouse may not let me keep doing this. We'll see. Seward, while the world was distracted by the falling ash, another tragedy was unfolding, one that wouldn't make headlines for years. Alaska. On May 19th, 1980, just one day after the earth fractured in Washington, a young woman named Joanna Messina, who was thought to be 23 or 24 years old, was reported missing. Joanna Messina was also known as Joanna Dimmy or Joanna McCoy. So many names. Now, she was a drifter seeking something she hadn't found in New York. She was a trained nurse who had walked away from her past. She had hitched her way to Alaska with only her most loyal companion, an overprotective German Shepherd. In Seward, her life was a series of tenuous anchors. She found work in a cannery and settled into a boarding house owned by an inexperienced landlord who seemed to care more about the tax write-off than the people living in his rooms. Sounds like a landlord. Tenants described her as isolated, preferring the company of her dog to the people around her. Guys, that's because dogs are better than people, okay? It was a dog that became her defining feature, an animal so intensely protective that those who knew them often whispered the same question: how could anyone get close enough to hurt her? Now, her life in Seward was defined by a steady retreat from stability. After being evicted from the boarding house, she stayed briefly with a friend, a situation that ended just as abruptly as it began. By the time she moved into a temporary campground, she was truly alone except for her dog. Guys, I'm upset that we do not have pictures of the dog. Okay? Now, when her friends returned to that campsite to check on her a few days later, they found only silence in the woods. There was no sign of Joanna, no sign of her dog, and no sign of a struggle. Joanna Messina had vanished. On May 19th, 1980, she was officially reported missing. The name confusion, Messina, Dimmy, McCoy, was the first of many hurdles that would plague this investigation. To the police, she was a drifter, a woman with no permanent address and a complicated identity. In the rush of everyday police work, these are the cases that often slip through the cracks. What they didn't know then, but we know now, is that the eruption of Mount St. Helens wasn't the only tremor in the Northwest that week. While the nation looked at the volcanic ash, a predator was looking at a map. And a woman who had come thousands of miles to find herself had instead walked into the past of a ghost. Oh, and Lady in Gray, who's modding over on the vertical, is anxious to see what Llama has found on these women. Oh, she did good, Leg. I will tell you, she did good. I've already been through it all. So while the authorities were still scratching their heads over Joanna Messina's disappearance in Seward, a new, more aggressive pattern was emerging in the heart of Anchorage. On June 28th, just a month after Joanna vanished, Roxanne Eastland, a 24-year-old woman known to the city's nightlife, left her room at the Budget Motel on Spinnard Road for a date. She never returned. Roxanne was a woman who navigated the blurred lines of the Anchorage underground. She was known by a dozen aliases: Karen Bunsgard, Cassandra Goodwin. Why? I don't know why it's not showing you all of their names, but I tried. But she moved through the world with the kind of fluidity that made her invisible to the people who were supposed to protect her. To the police, she was Avenue Girl, a label that carried a heavily dismissive weight in 1980. She was 5'4", slight of build, often wearing wireframe glasses and a distinctive brown leather coat with a dark fur collar. She was someone who frequented the downtown clubs, a fixture of the 4th Avenue scene. But on that late June afternoon, she was a target. Lady in Gray, I want to know myself. Lady in Gray says, I don't understand how Hansen controlled that dog. German Shepherds are notoriously protective and loyal to their person. 1,000%. I had a German Shepherd growing up. I have a German Shepherd Border Collie mix. And let me tell you, Bear would take you out, which leads me to think something bad was done to that dog. And I'm not going to think about it, okay? Her disappearance followed the same chilling script that would soon become all too familiar to Alaskan investigators. Roxanne left her boyfriend at the Budget Motel to meet an unknown male on 4th Avenue. It was the classic lure. When she didn't appear after a few days, her friends became desperate. Now, guys, why did the friends have to report her missing? Why did the boyfriend, and I'm saying boyfriend because if you're a parent, boyfriend, whatever, why weren't you trying to find her? Why? Okay. By July 2nd, the reports were filed. But again, the administration chaos worked in the predator's favor. With her multiple aliases, Karen Lee Bonsgarded became the most prominent. The paperwork was fragmented. In an era before centralized digital databases, tracking a woman who lived under several names was like trying to catch smoke in a windstorm, which is impossible, I think. The police treated her disappearance as a lifestyle issue. There was no citywide alert, no suspicion that a serial killer was operating a flight service out of the Anchorage airstrips. Roxanne Eastland never turned up. The brown leather coat, the high-heeled boots, and the life she was trying to build in a budget motel simply evaporated into the Alaskan summer. Roxanne Eastland was not just a missing person. She was the second chapter in a story of systematic failure. By the time her friend reported her missing, Robert Hansen had already turned his focus back to the bars, back to the clubs, and back to the hunt. He had learned that the police would do little more than file a report under an alias and wait for her to turn up. So Llama says she is now in a serious monogamous relationship with newspaper.com. Llama, I'm sorry to tell you, newspaper.com is also in a relationship with me, so it's not monogamous. Sorry if you thought it was. Just kidding. On July 8th, 1980, the silence of a gravel pit near Seward was broken by a discovery that would haunt the Kenai Peninsula for years to come. A camper, perhaps looking for a quiet spot away from the highway, stumbled upon a scene of primal horror. A large black bear had unearthed a shallow grave, and the body of a young woman had become a food source for the scavenger. The case was handled to investigator John Lucking. What a name, Mr. Lucking. A man who looked like he belonged on a football field, but possessed the sharp instincts of a veteran investigator. However, before Lucking could even begin to process the crime scene, he found himself in a bizarre standoff with Alaskan bureaucracy. Why am I not surprised? What about you guys? As Lucky arrived at the scene, the black bear returned to its spine. In Alaska, black bears were a protected species. I don't know why, but they are. I don't think they are anymore, but they used to be. The Fish and Wildlife Police arrived with a focus that infuriated Lucking. They were just as concerned with the safety of the bear as they were with the murder of the woman. Really, people? When the bear refused to be scared away, Lucking's team had no choice but destroy it. The resulting administrative heat, the paperwork, and the scrutiny over a protected animal, while a human lay discarded in the dirt, led the troopers to give Joanna a nickname that reflected both the tragedy of her remains and the absurdity of the investigation. The Bear Lady. What? That's just awful. Identifying the victim was a forensic nightmare. Wildlife had destroyed much of the physical evidence, and the search for her identity was hampered by the same aliases that had obscured her life. Initially known to local police as Joanna McCoy from New York, investigators hit a dead end until they uncovered the name Joanna Massini. It was through this name that they finally connected with her family back east and secured the dental records needed for a positive ID. She wasn't just a bear lady or a McCoy. She was a daughter, a trained nurse, and a woman whose journey west ended in a shallow pit. Lucking turned his sights on the Seward residence because Joanna had alienated many people at her boarding house. The list of suspects was long, but one name rose to the top: the veterinarian who had served as her landlord. So Lady and Grace says the bear police are serious in Alaska. Wow. I thought you could kill bears there now. Maybe that's over in Canada. Okay, maybe. A source, the friend who had reported Joanna missing, convinced Lucking that the vet and Joanna were having an affair. She painted a picture of a pat to stay scheme where rent was traded for sex. When the vet denied it, Lucking saw a liar. And when the vet failed a polygraph, the readings off the charts when asked about Joanna, Lucking believed he had his killer. Thank you, Llama, for correcting me. The pay to stay instead of pat to stay. I kind of like the pat to stay. You got to pat a little here, okay? Got it. Um, Lucking hypno- hypothesized the vet had grown tired of the arrangement, fearing Joanna would expose the affair to his wife and ruin his career. The vet used his knowledge of animals to neutralize her protective German shepherd and took her to the gravel pit to silence her. The vet essentially broke, confessing to the affair, but adamantly denying the murder. I mean, it'd be a lot easier to just divorce my wife if she found out than to kill Joanna, he argued. He was eventually cleared. And guys, a veterinarian having an affair might ruin your marriage life. I don't know how it's going to ruin your career because I was married to one and he slept with everybody. Okay. Now, the investigation has been a carousal of red herrings. The vet was innocent. The boarding house manager with the gun collection was a dead end. And the owner of the old camper was out of town. Joanna Messina's body had been riddled with bullet holes. But the bullets did not match, okay, any guns in Seward. The case went cold. Lucking didn't know now that while he was fighting over the life of a bear and chasing a small town affair, the real killer was 100 miles north in Anchorage, baking bread and cleaning the glass out of his truck. It would take 2 years and more bodies before the murder of Joanna Messina was finally linked to the man with the Piper Super Cub. That is awful. While the Kanaya Peninsula was reeling from the discovery of the Bear Lady, a different kind of I just lost my place. A different kind of horror was surfacing just north of Anchorage. On July 17th, 1980, I am not doing so good at this. Less than 10 days after Joanna Messina was found, a group of workmen clearing brush along a series of power lines in Eklutna made another gruesome discovery. Buried in a shallow, leaf covered grave was the body of a young woman. She was petite, barely 5 foot tall, and she had been there for a long time. In the police files, she was labeled simply as homicide, hashtag 43262. But to the investigators and the public, she would become known by a name that highlighted both the location of her arrest and the mystery of her life, Eklutna Annie. Veteran investigator Maxine Farnell took the lead on the case. From the moment the remains were unearthed, one thing was clear to Farrell. This woman didn't belong in the woods. She was definitely a city girl. Farrell noted, pointing to the victim's clothing. Eklutna Annie had been buried in high-style fashion that was ill-suited for the Alaskan bush. She wore reddish-brown, knee-high, high-heeled zip-up boots, a hip-length leather jacket, a sleeveless knit top, and blue jeans. Now, I just want to say, you can still be a city girl and go to the country, okay? So I don't like that. You can dress however you want, okay? In her pocket, investigators found a small, mundane detail that humanized the skeletal remains. A box of Salem matches. She was likely a smoker, a young woman who perhaps stood under the neon lights of the Anchorage Strip, lighting a cigarette before stepping into a car that she thought was a taxi or maybe a date. Sorry, guys, my whistle was wet or getting dry and it needed to be wet. Unlike many of Hansen's later victims who were stripped of their identities, Annie was. Okay, guys, sorry, this mouse is not working. Maybe it's getting low. Annie was found with a wealth of distinct handmade jewelry. These were the clues Farrell hoped would lead to a name. She had on a handmade metal bracelet set with 3 turquoise stones, a copper necklace with shell beads, and a heart pendant, a Timex watch with a brown face and circular metal links, and a gold-plated twisted metal hoop earrings. She was petite, likely between 18 and 23 years old, with hair that ranged from light brown to strawberry blonde. Some suspected Native American heritage, while others thought she might be one of the many women who cycled through the West Coast circuit of Seattle, Portland, and Anchorage. The autopsy revealed a chilling detail. Annie had been dead for at least 10 months. This meant she had been killed in the late fall or early winter of 1979. Around the same time, Christy Hayes, who we covered in the last episode, was fighting for her life in the back of a camper. Maxine Farrell expressed deep frustration, what was becoming a theme for Alaskan law enforcement. She had the jewelry, she had the dental charts, and she had the fingerprints. But in 1980, without a national database for missing persons in the sex trade, Eklutna Annie remained a ghost. Farrell believed she had several leads to a potential slayer. But the reality was that the investigation stalled at the most basic level. They couldn't find the killer because they couldn't even find out who the victim was. Rip my heart out and just shatter it, why don't we? Okay. At the time, no one linked Eklutna Annie to the bear lady found in Seward. One was a recent murder in a gravel pit. The other was a skeletal remain under a power line. But the signature was there for those who knew where to look. The shallow grave, the proximity to a transportation corridor, and the choice of a victim who existed on the fringes of society. While Maxine Farrell searched for Annie's name, Robert Hansen was still working his shifts at the bakery, confident that as long as his victims remained Annie's or Jane's, the law would never knock on his door. Guys, in case you didn't know this, I really don't like Robert Hansen, and I really don't like Alaska. I hate them. I hate them, okay? Oh, goodness, that went down the wrong pipe. Oh, my goodness, that has never happened on camera before. Sorry, guys. Oh, my goodness. As the summer of 1980 bled into September, the atmosphere in the Anchorage clubs shifted from vibrant to paranoid. 2 bodies had been found in July, and the Avenue girls were starting to notice who hadn't come back to work. On September 6th, the fear hit home at one of the city's most famous establishments, the Great Alaska Bush Company. Guys, really? Really? I'm sorry. Why? 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 Why did we call it that? Okay. Why? Now, Lisa Betty. Okay. Hold on, guys. I'm going to try to fix what's going on with my mouse and switch out mouses. Okay, let's see if that works. Lisa Betty Futrell, a 42-year-old dancer, finished her shift, adjusted her light blue down vest, and stepped out into the crisp autumn air for a date. She was never seen alive again. Unlike many of the younger women who were drifting through Alaska, Lisa was an established presence. Born in 1983, she was the oldest of the women who had vanished during this terrifying stretch. At 42, she was a veteran of the scene, someone who presumably knew the risk, knew the characters, and knew how to handle herself. When she left the Bush Company that evening, she was dressed for the cooling Alaskan weather in her light blue down vest, dark corduroy pants, and black shoes. And I'm thinking, guys, that we have her birth date wrong and it's a typo, but we're just going to keep going, okay? Because we think she was born in like 41, okay, if she was 42. So it's okay. She was dressed for that cooling Alaskan winter, okay? She was 5'2" with brown hair and blue eyes. She was a petite woman who, despite her years of experience, was no match for a predator who had spent the last decade refining his ability to immobilize his prey. Guys, that gives me goosebumps and chills to this day, okay? Now, Lisa was reported missing the very next day, September 7th. The speed of the report suggested she had a life that people noticed she was missing from. She wasn't a drifter. She had a job, a schedule, and people who expected her to show up. Now, her disappearance sent a shockwave through the Bush Company. This was the same club where just 6 months earlier, Christy Hayes had spotted Robert Hansen and called the police. This was the same club where Hansen sat in the dark booths, peeking around to make sure he wasn't recognized. Asshole. Now, with Lisa Futrell's disappearance, a pattern began to emerge. May 1980, Joanna Messina. Okay, guys, it's not popping up. Let me. No. Okay, first. Oh, there it goes. Finally, what is going on? But May 1980, Joanna Messina disappeared from Seward. Then in June 1980, okay, I give up. It's not working. Then in June of 1980, Roxanne Eastland vanishes from Anchorage. And then in September 1980, Lisa Futrell disappears from the Bush Company. Now, my mouse is being like the Alaskan police, okay? And not doing its job. Just going to say that. Llama, we are humans. And guess what, sweetheart? It is okay to make mistakes. We all do them. All we have to do is figure out where we made the mistake and put a plan in place so we can try not to do it again. But guess what, sweetheart? You might do it again. It happens. Okay? It happens. So don't do that to yourself. Okay? And why is my space so big over on the vertical? That's okay. The police now had 3 women missing in a 4-month span in 2 bodies, Joanna's and Eklutna Annie, cooling in the morgue. Yet, because Lisa was just another dancer and 42 years old, the urgency from the higher-ups was still lagging. The investigators were beginning to look at the date as the common denominator. The unknown man who waited outside the clubs, offering a ride for a few dollars, and then erased these women from the map. Robert Hansen had struck again, right in the heart of the city, at a club he frequented regularly. He was hiding in plain sight, guys, banking on the fact that the police would never think the local baker was the date who never brought these women home. Of course, why would they think that? Why would they do their job and do that? Okay, why would they? Come on now. As the first winter snows of 1980 began to blanket the Chugach Mountains, a heavy, suffocating silence settled over Sankridge. The silent decade hadn't just ended, it had shattered into a reality that no one in law enforcement was prepared to name. Guys, they were caught with their pants down. Okay, let's just be honest. In just one summer, the map had been marked with the blood of the found and the shadows of the missing. Joanna Massini was a name in a file in Seward. Ekalutna Annie was a city girl without a name in a grave north of town. Roxanne Eastland and Lisa Futrell were empty chairs in dressing rooms of Spinard, their leather coats and blue vests the only thing left of them. For Robert Hansen, 1980 had been a year of proof of concept. He had tested the eye bolt in the camper. He had mastered the logistics of the date. Most importantly, he had learned that the police were still looking at these cases as isolated tragedies, unconnected flickers of violence in a rough and tumble frontier town. But as the calendar turned to 1981, the predator wasn't retreating. He was emboldened. The winter was merely a time for maintenance, sharpening the knives, cleaning the rifle, and setting the flight charts for the spring thaw. The women of the Strip were starting to realize that going on a date was becoming a game of Russian roulette. But as 1981 dawned, they didn't know that the man behind the counter at the bakery was already scouting his next ex. Exactly, Lady in Gray. Tell her. Okay? She did an amazing job. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking. It must mean Double H is pulled up and she's going to bark for him. As the spring of 1981 thawed the Alaskan interior, the grim momentum of the previous year did not slow. The predator had spent the winter months undisturbed, and by the time June arrived, he was back in the cockpit. The first name to enter the missing persons ledger for 1981 is a woman whose story remains one of the most haunting in this entire case. Born on August 20th, 1955, Malaya Larson was 25 years old and just weeks away from her 26th birthday when she vanished into the bright, endless light of the Alaskan summer in June of 1981. In the records of the butcher baker, Malaya often exists as a shadow. Unlike some of the other victims whose movements were documented by roommates or boyfriends, the information available on Malaya is tragically sparse. We know her age, we know her birth date, and we know that by mid-June, the seat that she occupied in the world was suddenly, inexplicably empty. Malaya fit the profile that Robert Hansen had perfected. She was in her mid-20s, living in a city where people could come and go without being missed for days, sometimes weeks. In the eyes of the police in 1981, a 25-year-old vanishing from the Anchorage scene was often written off as someone who simply headed back to the lower 48 or moved on to the next boomtown. But Malaya hadn't moved on. She had been intercepted. Sorry about the dog barking. She's still going. Her disappearance in June of 1981 is a critical marker in Hansen's timeline. June was a prime month for the aerial hunting strategy. The days were long, the weather was predictable, and his family was often away, leaving his home and his camper as private staging grounds. He knew that the authorities were chasing ghosts in the gravel pits of the Kanaya Peninsula, while he was choosing his landing strips in the expansive, unmonitored brush of the Matanuska Susna Valley. Whew, okay. Malaya Larson was the first of the 1981 victims, a signal that the butcher baker was not satisfied with the count he had already achieved. I hate this man. I hate him. By late 1980, the air in Anchorage had grown thin and cold. The disappearances were no longer just a string of tragedies. There was a pattern that the Anchorage Police Department and the Alaska State Troopers were finally, reluctantly beginning to acknowledge. I mean, how much more Captain Obvious do you need, people? I mean, seriously. Into this vortex of uncensored stepped Sherry Morrow, also known as Georgia or Cherry Graves, a 23-year-old dancer whose life would become the key that finally exposed the butcher baker. He's already been exposed. They're just not believing him, okay? Not believing the girls. Sherry was remembered by those closest to her as quiet, shy, and a deeply lonely young woman. She had spent years drifting through the Anchorage club scene at the Strip and the Wild Cherry, always searching for something more than the transactional nature of her life, of the life she led. Friends described her as trusting to a fault, a woman who wanted to believe the best in people, even when those around her warned her that she was looking for respect in the places where it simply did not exist. I love that even going through, work in the clubs, she still tried to see the best in people. That tells you she had a good heart, guys. I'm sorry, it does. On the morning of November 17th, 1981, Sherry left a friend's apartment at the Sleeping Lady Apartments. She left behind all of her personal belongings, intending to return shortly. She had been offered an opportunity that sounded way too good to be true. $300 for an hour to pose for nude photographs. Hey, girl, yeah, that, I would fall for that. Would today. Now they would pay me to keep my clothes on, but I digress. For a dancer struggling to find a way out, the offer was a lifeline. She was to meet this photographer at Alice's 210 Cafe on East Fifth Avenue. She left the apartment wearing blue jeans, wire-rimmed glasses, and a baby blue ski jacket trimmed in a darker blue. She walked out the door and into the hands of the man who had been hurting her peers for over a decade. When Sherry failed to return, her family and friends knew immediately that something was wrong. She was not the type to vanish without a word. She would have reached out. As investigator Maxine Farrell noted, the fear wasn't just that she was missing, but that she had been lured into a trap, perhaps even taken by a predator operating under the guise of a professional photographer. The police were beginning to connect the dots between Sherry's disappearance and those of Roxanne Eastland and Lisa Fertrell from the previous year. All three were topless dancers. All three were seen leaving for a date or an opportunity. All three were gone, leaving behind families who were beginning to realize that the person they were looking for wasn't just a missing person. They were looking for a victim of an active serial predator. The disappearance of Sherry Morrow was the turning point. It was the case that moved beyond that lifestyle dismissal and forced the troopers to face the reality of a serial killer. As Sergeant Lyle Hoxhaven, sorry, sir, if I slaughtered your name, would later note, they had to keep these women in the back of their minds. But for Robert Hansen, Sherry Morrow was simply the next piece of cargo to be flown out to the Connecticut River and left to the elements. Guys, that is a horrible thought. That is a horrible, horrible thought. Following the loss of Sherry Morrow, the sense of dread among the city's dancers had reached a fever pitch. Yet, the predator remained relentless. He didn't give up. On December 2nd, 1981, another name was added to that tragic list. Andrea Mona Altieri. Exactly. Betty Ross said, finally, they pay attention. I mean, you could have hit these investigators with a cast iron skillet and they wouldn't have gotten it. Okay. Known to her friends as Fish and to the patrons of the Bush Company as Enchantment, Andrea was a 23-year-old dancer whose life was abruptly cut short during the transition into the holiday season. On the night of December 2nd, Andrea left her home with a specific destination in mind. She was heading to the Boniface Mall, reportedly to meet a date, an older man who had arranged to meet her there. According to those who knew her, she was expecting a professional engagement, a photo shoot. She was last seen taking a checker cab to the mall around 11 p.m. She was described as being between 5'2" and 5'6", with dark hair and hazel brown eyes. She was wearing a black leather jacket, a red sweater, blue jeans, and a distinctive brown set of cowboy boots. She also carried a black zipper purse and a small flowery patterned makeup bag. Andrea was more than just a dancer. She was a young woman who carried her history in her jewelry. When she disappeared, she was wearing pieces that were deeply personal to her. A green-colored ring with a single pearl, a golden-colored ring with a single pearl, another one with two pearls, an antique wedding band with a rose set atop, and a custom-made golden necklace shaped like a salmon featuring a diamond set at the eye. Not long after her disappearance, her family, perhaps feeling the crushing weight of the investigation, or simply trying to cope with the agony of the unknown, eventually requested that her missing person file be closed. It was a somber surrender to a system that had failed to find her, and a reflection of the profound grief that followed these women. Guys, no one should fault the family for doing that, okay? However they need to grieve and move on is 100% okay in their choice. The pattern was now screamingly obvious to those observing the string of disappearance, whether it was Sherry Morrow meeting a man for a nude photo shoot at Alice's 210 Cafe, or Andrea Altier heading to the Boniface Mall for a similar setup. The butcher baker had found his ultimate lure. He was using the promise of professional photography, a legitimate industry opportunity, to disarm women who were desperate for a way out of the clubs. He targeted their weakness. By the end of 1981, Anchorage had seen a devastating surge in disappearances. Andrea Altieri was the last to vanish that year, but her disappearance served as a grim conclusion to a year where the hunter perfected his craft. Robert Hansen was no longer just a predator hiding in the woods. He was an invisible architect of these disappearances, moving through the city with the confidence of a man who believed he would never be held accountable for the women he plucked from the neon lit streets of Anchorage. Ugh. Anchorage, you guys, Alaska, you gave him this power, okay? 1982 began with the city of Anchorage reaching a breaking point. The veneer of the butcher baker's anonymity was starting to crack, not just because of police work, but because the community itself was beginning to boil over with rage. So are we. So are we. So are we. On February 4th, 1982, the reality of this situation was laid bare. Veteran investigator Maxine Farrell stood before the press with a devastating admission. 7 women, 6 of them dancers from the downtown topless clubs, had vanished in the last 20 months. Lady in Gray, you're absolutely correct. Alaska law enforcement, y'all suck. Okay? And sadly, we know y'all still suck. Okay? All of these girls were missing, and we don't know where they went, Farrell stated. She had spent months traveling, calling, and pleading with the families of the lost, only to hear the same harrowing response: silence. No postcards, no phone calls, no running wait to start over. Just the gut-wrenching confirmation that their loved ones were gone. Man, guys, that is just horrific. While John Lucking and Chuck Miller were struggling with the Joanna Messina murder, a larger problem loomed on the horizon. You don't say. The first person to notice the larger issue was Maxine Farrell with the Anchorage Police Department. Farrell was troubled, deeply troubled. Now, while all of this was taking place, Maxine Farrell of the Anchorage Police Department noticed what looked like a strange new development. She was used to dancers being reported missing, only to turn up later. But now, topless dancers in the Anchorage area seemed to be turning up missing with increasing frequency. And not very many of them were turning up again. The press picked up on the story and headlined the disappearances with some alarm. Now, when some of the missing dancers eventually turned up in other cities, however, the newspapers lost interest in the story. But Maxine Farrell never lost interest. In fact, as 1980 stretched into 1981 and 1982, it was evident to everyone in law enforcement that something was amiss. Not our amiss, but something. And yet, while Maxine Farrell was the most suspicious, even her suspicions were difficult to document. The lifestyles of these women made it almost impossible to determine if there were a large number of missing dancers. Several factors were important in this. Yes, he did. He was escalating, to say the least. I mean, he kind of was given a pass. He was kind of told that he, wasn't doing anything wrong. He was let go. Now, the same night that Maxine Farrell told the city of Anchorage about the connection of the missing dancers, the Wild Cherry Club, the very place where Sherry Morrow had once danced, was plunged into a state of panic. Guys, the Alaskan Bush Company, the Kit Kat, the Wild Cherry, can we get some better names? Can we just get some better names, okay? An anonymous tip at 11:24 p.m. warned a bomb. Okay? When police cleared the building and bomb disposal crews moved in, they discovered a device inside a restroom toilet tank that at first, very first glance, looked like a death trap. There were safety flares, loose wires, transistors, and an alarm clock, all bundled to mimic a stick of high-grade C4 explosive. It was, as Police Chief Brian Porter later confirmed, a theatrical prop, fake, designed to terrify, not to kill. But the message left on the device was unmistakable. Someone in Anchorage was watching the same pattern the police were seeing. Someone was furious at the club owners, the establishment, and perhaps the city itself for failing to stop the predator who was plucking dancers off the 4th Avenue scene one by one. Chief Porter and the APD treated the bomb scare as a distraction, but it was actually a symptom of a deeper societal sickness. The city was beginning to realize that the disappearances weren't just isolated events. They were a systematic failure. The police had 7 names, 7 faces, and a growing stack of files, but they were still operating in the dark. Now, whether Robert Hansen planted that fake bomb remains one of the many what-if questions in the entire case. While we don't have a smoking gun, like a confession or a fingerprint on the alarm clock that we know of, who knows, police may not even have looked for all we know. There are several reasons why a few investigators and true crime historians have long suspected it might have been his work, or at the very least, a move he found deeply satisfying. Hansen viewed himself as the smartest person in any room. He was obsessed with control, and he had a profound contempt for the police. A fake bomb is the ultimate theatrical crime because it forces the police to stop everything, clear buildings, and sweat under the pressure of a potential disaster. All for a device that was never meant to go off. It would have allowed him to watch from a safe distance while the chaos he created paralyzed the city. He would have loved that, okay? He would have loved that. The Wild Cherry wasn't just any club. It was his own hunting ground. By placing a fake bomb there, he was effectively threatening his own inventory. But more importantly, it sent a message to everyone that I am in control of this space and you are all under my thumb. I hate him, guys. I really didn't think I could hate him more, but I do. Chief Porter specifically noted that the writing on the bomb suggested someone was mad at the establishment for missing girls. Hansen was an expert at projection. Throughout his life, he constantly blamed his victims and the police for his own circumstances. Using a note that mocked the police for their failures to find the missing women fits his psychological profile of an arrogant predator who mocks the incompetence of those trying to catch him. And they are incompetent. They were. Okay. He is right there. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Hansen's right once. They're incompetent. There's also the fact that Hansen was by trade a hunter and an outdoorsman who was comfortable with gear. Fiddling with flares, wires, and electrical components is exactly the kind of tinkering that he was known for. He was a man who built his own traps, modified his own aircraft. Yeah, guys. Now, it is equally possible that the fake bomb was the work of a furious member of the public or maybe a vigilante. By February 1982, the panic in Anchorage was absolute. The families of the missing were being ignored, and the strip community was terrified. It is entirely possible that someone else, tired of the police inaction, tried to force the issue by creating a media spectacle. Whether or not Hansen placed it, the bomb scare served his interests perfectly. It turned the police attention towards internal security and mad bombers, further distracting them from the quiet, stuttering man who was busy loading his Piper Super Cub for the next death flight. It was a smokescreen. And in the game of cat and mouse that Hansen was playing, smokescreens were his favorite weapon. Okay, guys, I really don't like this guy. I really don't. Llama, I think it was him too. I think it was him. I'm sorry. I think it was him. I do. Now, by May 1982, the predator wasn't just working the Anchorage Strip. He was reading a script that had become lethally efficient. Sue Luna, a 23-year-old dancer who had come to Alaska from Seattle for a brief 6-week stint, would become the next victim to vanish. Her disappearance didn't just haunt her family, it provided the Anchorage Police Department with the most chilling confirmation yet that they were dealing with a singular, repetitive predator. Finally, guys, finally, come on, seriously, finally. I mean, come on. She was described as tender-hearted, so gentle that she couldn't even bring herself to housebreak her own puppy. Okay, that's sweet. And she was also a devoted mother. Her 4-year-old daughter, Liz, stayed down in the lower 48 to go on a trip with family. When Sue arrived in Anchorage via a pipeline from Seattle managed by Talent West, she was cautious by nature, okay? But her sister, Bobby Moorhead, who had lived in Alaska for 20 years, had warned her repeatedly. I read about the missing dancers in the paper a year before, and I said, hey, it's dangerous up here. Yeah, it is. Okay, it is very dangerous. And yeah. On May 25th, Sue told her roommate, Robin Price, that she had met a man at the Good Times Club. There we go. That one I can like a little better, where both the women were dancers. She said he had approached her while her other date, a fisherman, was in the bathroom, offering her $300 for an hour of nude photography. It was a large sum of money, and she needed money for her daughter. So Sue accepted this offer. The next morning, May 26th, Sue left her apartment at the Sleeping Lady Apartments, the same complex where Sherry Morrow had lived, carrying stamped letters she had promised to mail for her roommate. She took a cab to Alice's 210 Cafe on East Fifth Avenue. Sound familiar, anyone? She was wearing a white ski jacket with red and black trim, blue jeans, silver high-heeled sandals, and her distinctive jewelry, a gold ring and a gold-banded digital watch. She was last seen at 10:30 a.m. by a cook at the cafe, leaving with a tall, dark-haired man. The letters that she was carrying never reached their destination. When Bobby went to pick up Sue for a weekend visit to her home in Chukukek, Sue wasn't there. And after talking with her roommate Robin, Bobby instantly knew that something was wrong. Her experience with the police went about as good as you would expect after all we've heard over these last several episodes. I mean, is anybody surprised? They were quick to dismiss Sue as a drifter who had likely gone to Hawaii. But Bobby knew that her sister would never abandon her daughter like that. Never. She said, "It made me mad because they didn't believe me at first." Girl, we're all mad too. We're all with you, okay? Sue's family put up a reward of $1,000 for any information for her safe return. But when nothing came of that, Bobby's grief transformed into a harrowing, solitary search. She spent days on horseback patrolling the Connecticut River Valley, the same desolate expanse where many other victims had and would be discovered later. She was looking for a grave she prayed she wouldn't find. Just going for a drive, I look out the windows and wonder, maybe he buried her there, she said. Okay. Guys, I want you to just let that sit with you for a minute and think about that. Her sister is going to where she knows other women have been found, and she wants to find her sister, but she's praying not to find a grave. Think about that. That is horrific. Investigators eventually recognized that Sue Luna and Sherry Morrow were physically carbon copies of one another. The MO was identical. The same lure, the same freaking meeting spot, and the same demographic. Oh, finally. Okay. The tragedy of Sue Luna's disappearance and the subsequent realization that she was part of an escalating serial murder case shattered the illusion that the women were simply drifters moving on to the next state. The butcher baker was no longer just targeting strangers. He was operating a systematic hunt, and Sue Luna was just the next name on his list. That is heartbreaking. Llama, right now, I am cussing you in my head, okay? Just so you know, because by August 1982, the Avenue was a place of ghosts. While the police continued to categorize the missing as transients, the families left behind were beginning to wage their own wars for the truth. Tammy Pedersen, a 20-year-old former gymnast and ballet dancer, would become the next name added to the ledger of the lost. Guys, missing person cases just break my heart. And what is so even worse about these missing person cases, knowing that there is a killer. So they're most likely not just missing. Born on November 20th, 1961, Tammy was a girl from Seattle who had once cautioned her mother about the dangers of smoking. But the fast life of the late 70s had a strong pull. By 16, she dropped out of high school and drifted into a world of drugs and late nights. Yet, Despite the distance and the lifestyle, she remained anchored to her mother, Judy Vickerin, by a phone line that hummed with regular updates. Glad you found the right stream, Lainey. At 18, Tammy's talent for dance took a professional turn. After an amateur night in Seattle, she was recruited by Talent West. Ring a bell? The same agency pipeline that had brought Sue Luna to the north and flown to Alaska. Guys, I just thought of this, and I have gone through this several times. Do you think the people who worked at Talent West were telling these women that they were going somewhere that other people they sent had gone missing? Do you think they said anything? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Her relationship with the state was volatile. Okay. Within days of her first arrival, she called home begging for a plane fare, telling her parents she hated the world she had found. But the cycle of the strip is hard to break. A year later, she was back, dancing in the Anchorage clubs and telling her stepfather, Gary, with a touch of pride, that she was the best dancer around. Still, the shadow was there. She told her parents she wanted out of the topless scene. She was looking for an exit. But guys, the exit she found wasn't one that she had planned. The last time Judy Vickerin spoke to her daughter was August 7th, 1982. A week later, when Judy tried to call back, the line was dead. The number had been disconnected. The mystery was punctuated by small, haunting details. Tammy was blind as a bat without her corrective lenses, and she had a new pair on order. She never picked them up. To her family, this was the smoking gun. Tammy wouldn't have taken off into the Alaskan wilderness unable to see. I agree. Tammy's biological father, a former bill collector, went to Alaska in search of his daughter, knocking on doors and searching the clubs. What an amazing guy. Judy badgered investigators who gave her the same tired refrain. These kids do this. They take off. I said this isn't the way it is with my daughter, Judy recalled. Judy, I don't know how you didn't want to fly over there and punch him in the face, because I want to for you. One afternoon, Judy thought the nightmare was over. She called a club and was told a Tammy Peterson was working. A woman's voice answered the line. Tammy, it's your mother. The voice on the other end exploded into anger. You're not my mother. Why are you doing this to me? My mom doesn't know where I'm at. It wasn't her Tammy. It was a dancer named Tammy Patterson. The brief spark of hope was extinguished, replaced by what I can only imagine was a deeper, more hollowed out sense of grief. Let's just keep sticking the knife into my heart today. The Vickerins, desperate for answers, didn't just wait for the troopers. They moved to Anchorage. Heroes. They hired a private investigator, eventually entertaining the hardest possibilities that Tammy's heavy cocaine habit had pulled her into prostitution, or that she had moved south out of shame. I can accept the possibility of what she was into, Judy said. I just want to find her. I just want to know if she's alive. But the reality was simpler and far more sinister. In August 1982, Robert Hansen was still active, still flying, and still looking for women who lived in the fast life. Women the police would assume had just taken off. Tammy Pedersen was a trained athlete, a daughter who kept in touch with her mom, and a woman who couldn't see the world without her glasses. She didn't just disappear because she wanted to. She disappeared because she had been silenced. Oh my gosh. Oh, that is just horrifying. The long, agonizing silence for the family of Sherry Morrow ended on September 12th, 1982. But the closure was bitter, and the discovery would expose a shocking disconnect between the grim reality of the Alaskan wilderness and the official stance of the law. Two moose hunters were working in the willow scrub sandbars along the Knik River, about a mile below the Palmer Alternate Highway Bridge. The area was a desolate stretch of terrain, accessible only by a rough, unmaintained road or by boat. One of the hunters, ironically an off-duty Anchorage police officer, was making a final sweep near his camp as the light began to fail. He spotted a flash of color in the brush, a dark blue moon boot. Nearby, half buried in the silt, lay a matching blue nylon ski jacket. Between them, a bone joint protruded from the sand. The next morning, the horrific truth was undeniable. While one thigh bone had been dug up and picked clean by scavengers, another bone remained anchored in the shallow grave. A kneecap was still attached by a flap of skin. The hunters called the Palmer State Troopers, who began the grim task of unearthing the remains of the woman the city had been looking for since November 1981. The autopsy was conducted by Dr. George Lindholm, who made a dental comparison and determined that the body was, in fact, that of Sherry Morrow. He determined that the cause of death was a gunshot wound after finding pieces of copper-jacketed bullet fragments in the victim's chest cavity. Guys, I just hope it was quick and painless, okay? Despite the discovery of Sherry's body, a woman who had disappeared after leaving a note about a $300 an hour photo shoot at Alice's 210 Cafe, the official response was one of staggering denial. Trooper Lieutenant John Shover publicly stated that there was nothing to indicate the disappearances of the other dancers were related. Dude, what hole are you living in? I really need to know. Okay? Even investigator Maxine Farrell, who had been so close to the files, echoed the sentiment. We don't believe that we have a mass murderer out there, some psycho knocking off girls, but we have to cover every possibility. Ma'am, excuse me, could somebody please explain to me how in the fuck they're not connecting the dots? How? This refusal to see the pattern was a crushing blow to the families of Roxanne Eastland, Lise Futrell, and Sue Luna. The police were looking at a map with pins scattered across it, yet they insisted the pins were falling at random. Okay, sure. They called it naivete or greed that led Sherry to the sandbar, framing her death as an isolated misfortune rather than the work of a calculated predator. I mean, guys, they are idiots. Alaska, you are stupid, Okay, I don't like to use that word, but you're stupid. You're stupid. Okay? While the authorities leaned away from the serial killer theory, Crime Stoppers offered a $1,000 reward for information. She said it. Denial makes them look bad and hurts their state reputation. Well, this makes them look worse. Okay? Makes them look worse. So the investigation was stalled. They knew where she was last seen, Alice's 210 Cafe. And they knew why she was there, the photo shoot lore. But without a name for the man who met her there, the case threatened to go as cold as the glacier-fed waters of the Knik. However, the discovery of Sherry Morrow changed the geography of the investigation forever. The Knik's River was no longer just a scenic waterway. It was now a confirmed graveyard. Whether the police were ready to admit it or not, the butcher baker had left a signature in the sand that could no longer be ignored. To Robert Hansen, 1982 had been a year of supreme confidence. He had watched the police dismiss the disappearance of Sue Luna. He had watched them struggle to identify the bear lady and Eklutna Annie. And he had watched them scratch their heads over a fake bomb while he continued to bake and bread for the community. Oh, I'm just a sweet little baker. I can't, guys, I can't. As the calendar turned to 1983, the predator's hubris was at its peak. He believed the vast Alaskan wilderness was his perfect accomplice, a vault that would never give up its secrets. But the spring thaw was coming, and with it, a series of events that would strip away that meek baker mask forever. Guys, he is screwing up the 80s just like he did the 70s. And these stupid people just don't get it. Just don't get it. Now, the transition from 1982 to 1983 marked the end of the police's ability to look away. But man, they tried. Oh, we know they did. The coincidence theory was about to be obliterated by a 17-year-old Cindy Paulson who would do what no legal system had managed to do: look the monster in the eye and survive to tell the tale. The silence was over. 1983 was the year the hunt turned back on the hunter. I mean, guys, it's been going on so long, okay? Even a movie doesn't have this much. That is what I'm sitting here thinking. I'm like, even a serial killer movie, fictional, fact is stranger than fiction, okay? Now, as 1983 began, the freezing Alaskan winter provided a grim sanctuary for the predator. The ground was iron hard, and the mountain passes were choked with snow. But the avenue remained active. It was during this cold stretch in February of 1983 that Angela Lynn Fettern disappeared. Born September 14th, 1958 in Seattle, Washington, Angela was 24 years old, nearing 25, when she crossed paths with the butcher baker. Like many before her, she was a young woman who had sought out the opportunities of the northern frontier, only to find herself caught in a cycle of silence. Details about Angela's final days are tragically scarce, a hallmark of the women Hansen targeted during the winter months. We know she was a mother of a daughter named Christina. We know she was from the Pacific Northwest, part of the steady migration of young people looking for work in Alaska's booming, rough-edged economy. Yes, now you're right. Llama said, we know why any true crime docs on Hansen don't like to tell the whole story. Yeah, they don't want to be like Terry and Llama and call Alaska out on their bullshit. Okay. When Angela vanished in February, her absence was not immediately met with alarm. Let me try that again, guys. Her absence was not immediately met with the alarm it deserved. In the eyes of an overwhelmed and often indifferent police force, another young woman disappearing from the downtown scene was a non event. Seriously, people, we're in 1983 and they are still wearing blinders. What the absolute hell? Guys, the fact that this is true should piss everybody off. Everybody should be screaming at their device right now because they're still calling it a non event. What in the actual fuckery? Okay. They didn't see the daughter waiting for a phone call that would never come. They saw a file that lacked a crime scene. February was a specific time for Robert Hansen. While his Piper Super Cub was often grounded by the harshest weather, he remained a master of the local hunt. He did. During these months, he relied more heavily on his vehicle and his intimate knowledge of the Anchorage outskirts, places where a body could be hidden under the snow, not to be discovered until the spring breakup months later. Angela Lynn Fetteran's story is a sobering reminder of the victims who exist in the periphery of the more famous cases. Because there was no dramatic escape stories or high-profile discovery scenes associated with her initial disappearance, her name is often whispered rather than shouted. Yet, she was a mother, a daughter. She was a 24-year-old woman with a life in Seattle that she was never able to return to. She meant something, guys, police officers. Angela's disappearance at the start of the year set a very dark tone for what was to come. The predator was no longer pacing himself. He was operating with a cold, mechanical frequency. As the snow began to melt in the coming months, the secrets he had buried in the winter, including the fate of women like Angela, would slowly begin to surface, forcing the city to look at the monster they had allowed to live among them. Alaska police, this is on you. Okay? This is on you. March in Alaska is a deceptive month. The days are lengthening, but the cold remains biting. Okay? And the city is often covered in a layer of breakup, slush, and ice. For Hansen, this was a transitional hunting period. He was preparing his Piper Super Club for the coming flying season. But he was still prowling the streets in his vehicles because he knows nobody's going to stop him. As the winter of 1983 began its slow, grueling transition into spring, the avenue claimed another life. Delyn, or Anne, hold on. I am sorry, guys. I do not have a photo of Delyn Sugar Renee Frey, who went missing. So I'm going to take down that photo. So Daylin Sugar Renee Frey was 19 years old when she vanished in March 1983. Born on June 2nd, 1963, in Baltimore, Maryland, as one of four daughters, Daylin had lived a life of constant movement. She had come to Alaska by way of highway, which, guys, Lum and I talked about this earlier. Why do you go from Hawaii to Alaska? I don't get it. I would have stayed in Hawaii. That's just me. But she was seeking the rugged opportunity of the North after spending time in the islands where her mother and stepfather, Jean and William Hanks, resided. I'm not shaming her. I'm just saying the cold and I wouldn't do so well. She had been a resident of Alaska for about a year and a half, just long enough to establish a life, but not long enough to escape the notice of a predator. Daylin was known to her friends and colleagues by the nickname Sugar. Working as a waitress in the downtown Anchorage scene, she occupied the middle ground between the transient nightlife and the service industry, a space that Robert Hansen watched with predatory intensity. At 19, she was part of a close-knit family with her sisters, Dawn, who lived in Fairbanks, and Delana and Missy, who lived in Hawaii. Despite the distance, she was a daughter whose absence would be felt immediately. When Sugar stopped showing up for her shifts and stopped calling home in March of 1983, the silence was deafening. Her disappearance followed the grimly established pattern. She was a young woman, relatively new to the city, working in the service industry of the 4th Avenue district. To the police, in 1983, she was yet another runaway or transient who had perhaps decided to head back to Hawaii. Did they check the flight manifest? Did they check? I'm asking, because I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say no, they didn't. They didn't see the violence of her exit. They only saw the empty space she left behind. Guys, I have said this before. I don't like Alaska, and the police are making me hate them too. Okay. Teresa Watson, a 22-year-old woman from Sacramento, California, had found herself living in the Palmer Anchorage orbit, a geographic triangle that Robert Hansen knew better than anyone. On March 25th, 1983, Teresa prepared for what she believed was a straightforward financial opportunity. Sound familiar? She told her roommate she was headed out to meet a man who had offered her $300 for just a couple of hours of her company. Sorry, guys. When Teresa walked out of her home that March evening, she wasn't just leaving for a date. She was stepping into a trap that little did she know had been refined over a decade of violence. She never returned to her roommate, and her name was added to the growing list of women who just didn't come home. Teresa Watson's disappearance occurred in the same month as Daylin Frey's, making a terrifying escalation in frequency. Hansen was striking almost bi-weekly now, suggesting that he no longer feared the law. Why should he fear the law? Why should he? Why should he? He was a man who believed he was invisible. The sheer volume of missing women in the first quarter of 1983 was beginning to create a pressurized environment for the Alaskan state troopers. And it should. They should have been feeling the heat. The coinkydink theory, as I call coincidence, was that the authorities had that they had leaned on during the discovery of Sherry Morrow's body was becoming impossible to maintain. While the police files on Teresa Watson remained frustratingly thin at the time, her disappearance served as one of the final weights on a scale that was about to tip. The darkest chapter of Alaska's history was reaching its climax. Finally, took long enough. Paula Golding was a 31-year-old health nut from Arizona who had recently arrived in Alaska from the warmth of Kona, Hawaii. Guys, I can't help but say, Llama and I both kind of think this. Was someone trafficking these women through Hawaii? So many are coming, or was it like a non-sanctioned agency like that other one? I don't know. It's just awful suspicious that so many women come from Hawaii to Alaska. I don't know. Paula was a woman who didn't fit the hardened mold of the Fourth Avenue scene. And that vulnerability is likely what drew Robert Hansen's eye. Double H is now making the dog's food. Sorry for all that noise. Paula was a newcomer to the industry. She had worked as a secretary in Fairbanks before coming down to Anchorage in April of 1983. Inexperienced and reportedly badly in need of money, she walked into the Great Alaskan Bush Company on Fifth Avenue and asked for a job. Janice Shepard, a floor manager at the club, hired her on the spot, noting that her good looks and eagerness were great, but the transition wasn't easy. Paula was modest, and for her first week, she refused to dance anything but topless. And remember, this is the Bush Company. They want to see it all. It took 8 days for her to work up the nerve to dance bottomless, a decision driven by the promise of the higher tips she needed to fund her planned return to Hawaii. She didn't like Alaska, and she was already planning her exit. She wanted to get the hell out of there, okay? On the very night she finally got up the nerve to dance nude, she met a man at the club. He offered her $200 just to meet him for lunch the following day. It seemed like a safe encounter. It was a daylight meeting, a simple meal in public, and a quick payday. His only specific request was that she arrive by taxi. Hello, 80s. Thank you for popping in to join this horrific tale. Okay. On Sunday, April 24th, 1983, Paula Golding called a cab and left her home for what she thought was a harmless date. She had been in Anchorage for only 3 weeks. She told a friend that very day that she was going back to Hawaii. She never made it to the airport. Because Paula had no relatives in Alaska and had only been at the Bush Company for 8 days, her disappearance carried a particular kind of silence. To the system, she was the ultimate transient, a woman with no roots, a brief employment history, and a stated desire to leave the state. Alaska, people get there and they want to leave you. Have you thought about looking into that? They don't like staying there. Okay? But to Robert Hansen, she was the perfect target. He had scouted her at the club, tested her boundaries with a low-pressure lunch offer, and ensured she had arrived in a way that left no vehicle for the police to track. Paula would become another file in the cabinet that was already overflowing with the names of women who had gone to lunch, gone for a photo shoot, gone for a date, and simply never came back. By the beginning of the summer of 1983, the neon lights of Anchorage 4th Avenue cast a long, cold shadow over a city in denial. What had begun as a series of whispered rumors in dressing rooms had transformed in the documented ledger of the lost. From the seasoned experience of Lisa Futrell to the tender-hearted nature of Sue Luna and the quiet aspirations of Paula Golding, a generation of women was being systematically erased. And the police had their heads up their ass. Okay, I added that. The statistics were now undeniable. Even if the authorities remained hesitant to say the words out loud. In the 3 years since 1980, 14 women, yes, let me say that louder and move closer, 14 women, many of them carbon copies of one another in stature and circumstances, had walked out of clubs like the Wild Cherry and the Great Alaskan Bush Company and simply vanished into the subarctic mist. For the families left behind, the mothers in Seattle, the sisters in Chugach, and the daughters waiting for phone calls, the transient label used by the dumbass police was a second victimization. They knew these women weren't just drifting to Hawaii or the lower 48. They were being taken. Now, I need to stop and say, I'm not going to forget about our good law enforcement guy, Officer Baker. He is not an idiot and he is not stupid. Okay? Robert Hansen continued to move like a ghost through the city with the chilling confidence of a man who used the wilderness as his silent partner. He was a pillar of the community by day and a hunter by night, banking on the idea that as long as his victims remained avenue girls, the law would never look closely at the man behind the bakery counter. But the ground was softening. The Knik River was rising. And while the police were still debating the coincidence of the missing dancers, a terrified girl in the back of a Piper Super cab was about to do what years of police files could not. She was going to give the ghost of 4th Avenue a voice. Guys, I hope y'all are as pissed off as me because I am so mad. I am starting to have a hot flash because I am pissed. I want to know what my ring says my heart rate is. I've got my phone on silent because I can feel it going. Okay. I'm pissed, but oh my goodness, guys. Next time on True Crime and Wine Times Frozen Fear, the Butcher Baker of Alaska series, piece of shit guy, we're going to follow the girl who started it all. Okay. After her harrowing escape, Cindy Paulson finds herself a ghost in the system, dismissed by the police as recovered simply because she returned to the streets to survive. We follow her from the rain-slicked blocks of Portland back to the neon shadows of Anchorage, where she seeks sanctuary in the gentleman's retreat, and finally finds a mentor who teaches her how to fight back. But while Cindy is building her own fortress, the law is finally waking up. We'll meet the nice guy detective, Sergeant Glenn Floth, as he takes a shit sandwich of an investigation and turns it into a surgical strike. From the forensic riddles of redressed bodies to a jackpot interview with the hunting buddy, the map of Alaska is about to start bleeding. The meek baker thinks he's outsmarted the world, but the mine hunters at the FBI are already sketching his soul. and a 48-page affidavit is about to blow his front door wide open. Join us next time for Part 9, 1983, The Beginning of the End. Finally, the end. Now, guys, I am going to read Llama's closing thoughts. She has put them here for me and even left a little note for you guys, okay? She said, please read, because it makes me sad that I wasn't able to be on this episode, because I have spent so much time thinking and learning about all of the women we covered tonight. When I started doing a deeper dive into this case and saw the number of victims and then the tragedies of the 70s, I went straight to Terry and said, we have to cover all of these women and tell their stories. Otherwise, we're no better than the society and law enforcement that ignored them. It didn't take in much convincing. Tonight's episode isn't just dedicated to humanizing these specific women, but also for all of those out there living the same lifestyle and feeling shamed by our modern society. I want them all to know that you are seen, you are cared about, and you are equal human beings. And I am so sorry that this bias still exists. Okay, Llama. And yeah, law enforcement doesn't seem to give a shit. But please be like Patty Roberts, the Jane Doe school teacher, Christy Hayes, and Cindy Pawson. They didn't get the justice they initially deserved, but they helped tell the stories of all of these women and what they must have went through as well. I know society looks down on all these women, but they are the true heroes of the story. They helped give voices to those who have been silenced. I send all of my love and thoughts to the survivors and to the families of the victims. You all deserved so much better. And I am sorry because none of them deserved any of this. None of this should have ever happened. We chose to tell the whole story because it has to be talked about. We can't continue silencing any more voices and allowing undeserved pats on the back. Shame on you, Alaska. Shame on you. Oh, Llama. I thank you so much for bringing all of these stories to me and for wanting to do this. It's one of the reasons I love you. And it's one of the reasons that I asked you to go from producer to being co-host and to being a partner with me on this crazy true crime and wine time train. I really appreciate it. I didn't think I would have much to say about this case, okay? Because what haven't I said? But guys, I was wrong again. Don't tell Double H that because I'm never wrong when it comes to him. But what really sits heavy with me in this stretch of history isn't just the violence. It's the indifference that wrapped itself around it. These weren't invisible women. They were daughters, mothers, friends, people with routines, voices, and they were lives that fucking mattered, okay? And yet, over and over again, they were reduced to labels like drifter, lifestyle, avenue girls, as if that somehow made their disappearances easier to dismiss or their lives less worthy of urgency. That kind of thinking didn't just fail them. It protected the man who was hunting them. Just like I say on Midday Missing, not keeping silence makes you as bad as the perpetrator. Alaska law enforcement, that's you. Okay, that's where I get pissed off again and again. because this wasn't just one predator operating in the shadows. It was a system that kept looking away. Files were fragmented, reports were delayed, patterns that were so captain obvious were ignored. I bet my 6-year-old grandson could have put that shit together faster. There were enough warning signs to light up the entire map of Anchorage. And still, no one wanted to say what was happening out loud. These women deserved to be searched for with the same intensity as anyone else. Instead, they were left to become ghosts long before anyone even admitted they were gone. Once again, we see that law enforcement prefers perfect victims. And to that, I say, kiss my ass. Okay? There is no such thing as a perfect victim. Why? Because there's no perfect human. And guys, it's impossible for me not to be livid. Yes, hindsight is a thing, but damn, you can see the moments where someone could have connected the dots, even without a computer, even on paper, even just reading a newspaper. Okay? And they didn't. And because of that, the silence didn't just continue, it got louder, swallowing more names, more lives, more futures that never got the chance they deserved. And guys, he didn't, the police in Hansen didn't just destroy the women's lives, he destroyed their families, their children, their mothers, their friends. This is not just a one victim scenario. He damaged so many people, and Alaska let him. These victims and their families were victimized over and over again. And did I say how much I hate Robert Hansen in Alaska? Because I effing hate them. I hate them. Okay. I hate them. I despise them. I think Alaska is a beautiful place, but I have taken it off my list to ever want to go there and see it. Okay. I'll just watch the pictures. I'll just look at people's pictures. Now, before we go, if you've liked what you've heard tonight, and guys, even if you haven't liked it, I'm going to ask you to follow our socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Why? Because it's free. And because Llama and I are pretty awesome. Okay. We're pretty awesome. We're pretty fun. If you're listening to this over on the pods, please download and give us a rating. All of these things help us tremendously get our channel out there. And guys, it helps us tell stories that are important. A lot of time on True Crime Time, yes, we're telling important stories, we're telling cases, we're sharing things, but it's cases like these where there was systematic failures and plain disrespect of the victims needs to be told over and over and over. Okay? Now, I don't know exactly right now when we'll be back. We will be back on Thursday night. I'm not sure if we'll be back tomorrow night. We will see. But we will be back for sure on Thursday night for True Crime and Wine Time at 8 o'clock, where we are going to continue diving into this asshole, Robert Hansen, and the god-awful Alaskan Police Department. Okay? I am going to wish Llama all of the good vibes for her to be better and feel better so she can be here with us next time. To everybody else, I'm going to ask you to stay safe. I am also going to ask you, share these videos with people you know. Put it on your social media. Alaska needs to be held accountable. And these families deserve us to shout from the mountaintops since no one else did for them. Okay. So I'm going to ask y'all to do that for me. And I will be on tomorrow at noon for Midday Missing. That's noon Texas time, Central Time. So join me there. You'll get to hear me rant about some more missing people that law enforcement isn't doing their job. Betty Ross, I am with you. It was on my bucket list. It is off my bucket list. Done. Off it. Nope. No desire. Sorry. No desire to be there. But guys, take care of yourself and see you soon. Bye, guys.